Hi everyone, this is Karak from ACG, and you might know me from my time on the award-winning soap opera One Life to Live in the Sunset of the Days of Our Lives. And today is one of those days, because I've now seen it all. I've now seen a man ride a red-hot horse made of steel and beg for more. I've seen that same man bed a 70-year-old coffin of a woman by effectively beating her into submission and then being thanked for it and doing some kind of chicken dance. Does that sound crazy to you? Well, guess what? It's not. It's Way of the Samurai 4 for the PC, and the game gets stranger than that really quickly. This game originally came out in 2012 for the PS3 as a downloadable title, and the next in line to the real-life gut-cutting simulators of the Way of the Samurai family. But this one was always a bit different, and somehow someone somewhere thought it needed to be on the PC. Let's see if I agree, shall we? The game's published by Ghostlight and developed by Acquire Corp. Always remember, this review is caffeinated, which means slicing through your cerebellum like a samurai sword all snicker snack. Let's do this. Graphics, as always, are up first. You know, this is a console to PC port, which is like a four-letter translation for the word blah, but in technical terms. Other than a higher resolution and some improved on, or at least sharpened textures here and there, the game indeed does look a bit portish, and to the woe and damnation of the new Curator group fighting the good fight, the game is indeed locked at 30 frames per second, which, while sucky, is done because the AI is actually latched to the frame rate, and switching it would be no easy task. However, despite some of these questionable decisions, at times the game looks pretty good. Not great, but not entirely PS3 native either, and while in battle with 20 Yakuza while dodging massive steel blades the size of airplane propellers, it can actually look sorta good. And the main character's overall facial textures and the work done on the various clothing options looks very good, and though there is some clipping here and there, the numerous weapon styles showed an attention to animation that was more than a little surprising. The game still does end up falling into the debris field of flatness known as console to PC porting, though. And no matter where you are, shrine, town, harbor, graveyard, or fresh eel soup stand, the game doesn't shine so much as it occasionally glitters once or twice. Overall, I'd say pretty good. Sound, music, and voice.
おろしげる感服つかまつった俺に変われ
As always, sound is up first, and from beginning to end, my ears were assaulted by the evil god didn't check the tonal Rangicus and his heady band of high treble sound samplers. Everything from walking on the grass to slamming 5 feet of hardened family lineage ending steel against someone's face sounded incredibly weak. The lower end is just almost completely missing, and where it wasn't, it was very thin, like a filter bin run over the entire sound effect, resulting in tinny and uncomfortable listening environments throughout. I would say not good. Now moving on to music. I actually thought what I heard of the tracks sounded good, but the entire sound umbrella suffered from a horrendous bug where audio buffers would get filled, and corruption like the ancient samurai of old decided to resurrect the world's worst clarinet player to screech into my speakers happened almost constantly. This went away when the music was turned down, but was replicated on 3 different computers across completely different sound systems and hardware. Luckily, the effect was completely removed when the music was turned off. Honestly, what was playing wasn't that good, and the original game was never bandied around in deep game theory conversations for his music chops anyway, so it's not like it's some massive loss to the music world. However, I would have actually liked to have the music playing throughout the game. Now, voice. And actually the voice acting, which is all in Japanese, was done very well and was correct tonally, and matched fairly well to the lip syncing. Emotions do run high in a few spots, but the voice actors do their best with some of the wonkiest writing known to man. I mean, this is like a drunken fever dream of an adolescent nerd's idea of what a samurai would be like. It's one half generic, one half what the hell, and constantly sways from somewhat normal to oh my god what is happening, without care for story or delivery. This is a case of voice being delivered really, really well despite everything really being stacked against it. And of course that brings us to gameplay. You play as the unnamed samurai landing in a small Japanese village during apparently the little known British race riots that occurred at some point in the 1800s. 3 factions face off. The British, wanting to expand their growing nation of top hat wearing ninnies and painted up 8-year-olds, which I'll get to in a moment, and the nationalists who just don't like them strangers none and do their best to make sure that the British feel once again like an entire nation doesn't want them around, and the local government, which is sort of in the middle, but in the being so mired in their own bullshit and stupidity that they end up hiring you, a dude wearing wooden block shoes, to go spelunking with them. And yes, that's a real quest. If you like straight up balls out audacity, that's one thing the game actually does have. The game is played across 4 total days from the time you arrive to the time you see the credits roll, and it starts out fairly quickly regardless if you're traveling to and fro from the smallish loading areas, picking fights, hitting on the ladies, eating noodles, fishing, or accosting young vagabonds by hammering on them with the back end of your sword, hoping that they're gonna think you're cool and join your dojo. Throughout your short stay, you can join factions, arguing over the various changes that the British have elected in the village, and also fight for them, take on quests of various types, though they have absolutely no depth and many times evolve around the developer's intense hatred for local art and pottery. Or you can sleep through almost every single day by finding a random mat that's just sort of laying out because someone forgot their blankets. Since you only have 4 days until things start to wrap up, you're either constantly under the time stress, or you're like me and just threw up your hands and said, screw it. So in my first playthrough, I ran around the town pissing off as many people as I could, fighting a bunch of them, getting arrested countless times, and unlocking the coveted title of delinquent. Only later on in other playthroughs did I focus on joining one of the factions and helping them in various ways, because the game rates you on how you do what you do and the choices you make. Also, battle actions feed into that, and at first blush it looks like a fairly heady battle system with various sword, spear, hand-and-hand, and gunfighting styles, each of which have their own moves, and as you kill enemies with your chosen styles, you gain additional moves to add to them. Additionally, all weapons can be recast, repaired, broken down to make new ones, and upgraded in various ways via the most negative and altogether lackluster armorsmith that ever existed in a game, constantly reminding you that he wants to leave town, there is nothing you can do about it, and he never actually leaves. Once again, reminding you that someone somewhere thinks that reluctant weaponsmiths are hilarious. Also, the combat is just frankly woeful. It's not just slow, it's disjointed, with even the normal combos feeling terribly ill-timed. The game single-handedly makes controlling and fighting like a samurai a really desolate of fun affair. This is basically like taking a Porsche to a racetrack and shifting from first to second occasionally. Just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and rev it up and boom, back again. For no good reason, but still thinking that you got your money's worth. No matter what martial art style you pick, the combat is jilted and missing any kind of fluidity you would assume a samurai had, and switching various stances and weapons didn't fix the fact that combos don't feed into one another very well. And there's not only hesitation in the fighting engine itself, like the game's adjusting to being told what to do and isn't quite sure if it wants to, but the enemies fight with the same dogged perseverance and one-on-one AI of the original Assassin's Creed game, almost never taking you on in teams. I had 7 enemies around me, and they continued to defy good logic by letting me slay their brethren with my new sword, the Belittler, in front of their unblinking eyes. In fact, many times, they just sort of jiggled back and forth like they thought they could mesmerize me all Cobra Snake style. It didn't work. They died. And many times they died without swinging a single time, as they sort of caught on the edge of buildings, investigated planter pots, or somehow attempted in the best way possible to find a way to drown in a couple inches of water. At the best of times, Way of the Samurai 4 doesn't seem to know what it wants to be, which is very unlike its predecessors. Here you have the ability to join factions and make tons of moment-to-moment decisions in the game's highly touted decision-making system, which is where the titles get their name from. But you have an incredibly small time to do it in, removing almost any of the true impact from doing so. You can take on quests that are so single-minded they are practically binary by choice. You can explore the locations, which turn out to be a couple places to eat, gamble, possibly score a geisha, but there is really very little to grab you. Not so when it comes to the end game, however. You see, in Way of the Samurai 4, one playthrough is just the beginning, and your playthroughs can run as short as 2 to 4 hours, meaning this game's going to be listed in the inevitable Steam Curator group known as locked at less than 8 hours gameplay. But when you start over, that's where the magic begins. The world changes each time you play. If you hit the local Yakuza hard on your last playthrough, they might have a stronger presence this time around. Things you choose to do and factions you aligned with make subtle changes each time you start over, including passing on weapons and armor to your next character. That was fantastic fun to see the differences in the game world, but it also means you have to force yourself through the actual game. Also, there are some side activities you can do, such as fishing, which is standing near a river hitting the A button when indicated, and the dreaded night crawling, which sounds also related to fishing, except here the bait is you and the catch of the day is a mix of a middle-aged man's first sexual experience and a Billy Blank's dance instructional set. This nightmare fuel begins when you hit on someone to make a play date. You go to their home, sneak around, beat up other suitors like wild dogs at a bitchin' heat party, then beat up and push around your amorous target, and when all's said and done, you do a little dance, you make a little love, and you get down tonight. It's as odd as it sounds. Now, one place where the game does excel is the customization of the character, and with both money spent and frequent playthroughs, you can create some fairly unique and amazing looking warriors to spend 4 crazy nights with. However, you only have a couple various skin tones. Now, that moves us to fun factor. You know, despite all the issues with gameplay and story and humor and gameplay again, I actually did find myself enjoying many parts of the game. Perhaps it was the breadth but fairly shallow gameplay that sort of felt both fresh and also a little endearing and just quirky at times. It could have been the obvious time taken and expected return in the battle animations and ton of martial arts styles, just the overall customability. Going so far as letting you open your own dojo, though 4 days seems to be a fairly short course in self-defense. It could be a number of things, but much of it was because the game was just pure anarchy, and despite a couple playthroughs, something new or odd happened in relation to a decision I made, and I can't get that kind of player agency in many games, even the big AAA games that don't have sex toy jokes. But that's also where the game takes its biggest blunders. See, the game is mired in humor, but it's a humor that rarely, if ever, hits, and many times is indistinguishable from those uncomfortable moments family members walk in on parents making the two-back beast while watching The View. Everything from sexual innuendo, torture, sadomasochism, and at the very least a possible case of really bad incest are all handled with the writing dexterity of a hammer, leaving the gamer many times not even chuckling, but wondering to themselves seriously, who even makes a game like this? No lie, this is an actual sentence I said out loud while playing the game. What in the hell am I hitting on an 11-year-old painted up like a Texas kid in one of those probably illegal kid dance pageants for? And that was just the second playthrough. You know, a game like this, with this kind of humor, needs to handle it with not only a personal roast kind of feel, but a feeling that lets a gamer in on the joke and lets them know that it's all fun and games. At no time other than the chicken dance did the game really even hint that it was aware of just how many odd and sometimes fairly controversial things it was showing. The problem is, I can somewhat see where these guys were going in delivering a bite-sized payload of a game where even the smallest decisions mattered, and engulfed in the heady culmination of 3 spirited groups fighting racism against unchanging nationalistic values would have actually been awesome. Instead, we got sex jokes and a good deal of really uncomfortable moments. So I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never talk about it again rating scale. This is a wait for a sale. The game should have been titled, "Listen, we have 4 days to make you as uncomfortable as a samurai as possible edition." Because that's what it does, falling down in many categories that should matter and only really shining in a couple. Now, some people who enjoy the quirky games won't find offense at the title's $14.99 price tag, but there are a boatload of other games at that price, or better, that are well worth a look from most gamers. I won't lie though, this game's uncomfortable uniqueness and breadth of systems made it fun enough that it almost became a buy just because it has the potential to be one of those unique experience games. But I just don't think it would have been all that truthful as a final score. So that's it for me. If you liked the review, hit like. If you disliked it, hit dislike, and peace out.